Hello, Amber. This is The Woman on the Ledge for you, Amber. Hope you enjoy. For my mum, with love, always. Prologue. Monday, the 19th of December. I wake with a start, my heart racing. There's a second or two of confusion as the morning lights creep through the slats in my blind. Then I hear it, banging, male voices shouting, "Open up, please!" For a second or two I am so heavy with sleep and fear that I can't move a muscle. My stomach tugs and my mind whirls. They've come for me. They've finally come for me. Then it starts up again. The banging. It's loud. They're at the front door, I realise with alarm. Someone's buzzed them in through the communal door. They can't have rung my buzzer. I'd have heard it. In a flat this small, it sounds as though they're already in my front room. George, my cat, springs off the bed and darts underneath the wicker chair. I push my covers back quickly. "Coming!" I shout, but my voice comes out high-pitched and thin. I hope they can hear me. I don't want them to start breaking down the door. I reach for my jeans and pull them on as quickly as I can, then grab a clean t-shirt from a pile of laundry that's sitting on top of the chair. I grapple with my nightdress, yanking it off, and pull the t-shirt over my head, catching my arms painfully on the bedroom door handle as I run down the hall. "I'm coming," I called again, gripping my sore arm. I reach up and grab the key from the ledge above the front door. My fingers are trembling as I slide back the security chain. "Just a second," I plead. "I just need to unlock it." I turn the key and push up the latch. They swarm in, huge men in uniform and stab vests in my tiny hallway. 2, then 3, then 4 of them. They push their way in, invade my space, as if I'm the dangerous criminal they think I am. A female cop is here now, thank God. "Take Kinsella." "Yes." She takes my forearm and lifts my hand, snaps a handcuff over my wrist. "Take Kinsella, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder," she says, and then rattles off quickly. Off pat. "You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Got that?" I nod. They search my living room and bedroom then, while I stand in the kitchen with the female cop, the handcuffs clamped heavy and tight round my wrists. I run my tongue over my teeth and glance around the kitchen, my mind spinning with all the things I need to think of. But being shackled so close to a complete stranger, I can't get my thoughts straight. The roof of my mouth is bone dry. "Can I get a drink of water?" I asked, nodding towards the sink. The counter next to it is piled up with plates and dirty dishes. Last night's empty wine glasses, 2 of them, smears of ketchup and grains of egg fried rice on the worktop, wine and a takeaway, the kind of meal you eat when you've got something to celebrate. The cop's eyes follow mine. I wonder if she's already profiling me. "Not now, later," she says. "My cat," I say. "I need to make arrangements." "What arrangements?" "My neighbours, please. I need to call her. My phone, it's in my bed." "We'll sort that out for you." "She lives 2 floors up. She has a key. I just need her to ask to feed my cat." "Like I said, we'll sort that out." Another 10 minutes, and I'm escorted out the flat. My heart hammers in my chest at the sight of a blue fluorescent yellow checkered police vehicle, parked with intriguously next to my little Corsa on the narrow street outside. It's mid-December, and the air is fresh and cold, but the police have taken my coat and all my jumpers. I shiver in my thin t-shirt as the back door is opened from me, and I'm pushed down into the rear of the car. We travelled the short journey to the police station in silence. The female cop driving and male colleague next to her, me in the back. Just the occasional staccato crackle of the police radio, and the man officer's low-toned response floating around on my thoughts. We pass the Middle Eastern restaurants and shops on Egway Road, the bookies and the cash converters, Upper Berkeley Street, Portman Square. It all looked the same, but not the same. I walk these streets most days, but everything looks new, like it does when you come back home after a holiday. Will I ever come back again? My heart thumps against my chest. It's nothing, I tell myself. I'm bound to be anxious, but now, more than ever, I need to stay calm. One thing I'm glad of is that I won't be going back to that office ever again. My stomach wrenches at the thought of it. Peering over the edge of the roof terrace, seeing her broken body on the pavement looking like nothing more than a pile of clothes. A person-shaped pile of clothes. Her shoe in the road, her handbag hanging, caught on a spike of a railing. I replay it over and over in my head. The indescribable pain she must have felt as she hit the ground. And then I'm crying again. Every time I see her broken body, I feel winded, as if I can't breathe, as if I am the one who is fallen 25 floors from a London roof terrace to my death on the pavement below. We pull into a gated entrance at the back of the police station as the cop car stops. I'm taken through the yard full of police vehicles and into an empty room with concrete walls and black plastic crash mats spread across the floor. I'm told that this is a holding cell and that we will have to wait because we're in a queue to get into custody. After a few moments, the officers speak through the intercom and we're buzzed in. I'm now in a stark foyer with a single high desk. I sit on a bench flanked by two officers. The female officers take off my handcuffs, find a small box of tissues, and puts them on the bench next to me. I'll get you some water, she offers. Thanks. I rub my sore wrists, take a tissue out the blocks, and wipe my streaming nose and eyes. The female officers disappear and leave me with the male one. He's young, clean-shaven, fair-haired, pimply. He looks like my nephew Josh, which comforts me a little as we sit there on the bench side by side. The female officer returns with a plastic cup and hands it to me. I take a gulp. It's ice cold, but welcome. I swallow down the rest. You want some more? No, it's okay, thanks. We wait a few moments longer, and then the sergeant behind the desk waves us forward. He asks me a series of questions about my state of mind, which I tell him is fine, although obviously it's been better. He reads me my rights, which I tell him I understand. He offers me a lawyer, I accept. He tells me that he'll get me the duty solicitor. I'm then given a blanket and shown into a cell. They take my shoes and my clothes and give me a sweat top and joggers to wear. The door slams shut, and I lie down on the bed and close my eyes. I won't sleep. I don't need to sleep, but I don't want to look at the metal toilet in the corner, which has no seat or lid. I don't want to look at anything, even with my eyes closed. Everything is so alien. The clothes I'm wearing, the coarseness of the blanket against my fingertips, the slamming of cell doors, the jangling of keys. I draw my knees up to my chest. I have so much to think about, so much that I need to go over. There's so much I need to say to my lawyer when he or she gets here, but my hands and my feet are cold and my mind is numb. The blanket isn't warming me, but I don't know if I will be allowed a second one, and I don't want to draw attention to myself by asking. No matter how much I try to focus on my breathing, in for 4, hold for 5, out for 6 and 7, I just can't get it all straight in my head. When the lawyer arrives, they come for me again. There's a tap on a tiny window in the door, and this time the jangling of keys is for me. I'm handcuffed once more, but only briefly. They take the cuffs off as I'm shown into a small room where the lawyer is waiting. It's a woman, in her late 30s, I'd say, a similar age to me. She was wavy, fair hair pulled back into an untidy knot, and she was wearing a fleece top, jeans, and trainers. She's not what I expected, I thought. They all wore suits. But wearing a blanket, paper shoes, and somebody else's tracksuit, and so her casual appearance immediately put me at ease. Hello, Tate. Sit down. I'm Sarah, she says. I'm your lawyer. Is that okay? I slide onto the bench opposite her. Sure, I agree. You have a choice, she smiles. Her eyes are kind. If you decide you don't think I'm the right lawyer for you, you can ask for someone else. And everything you tell me is completely confidential. I have to tell you that. I'm not allowed to step outside this room and tell anyone what you've told me. I nod. Except, she continues, what we both agree that I can say on your behalf to the police or in the court or to my colleagues if I need to. Okay. She moves a finger across the trackpad of her laptop. Your name's Tate Kinsella, is that right? And your date of birth is the 8th of June 1984. Yes. Good. Okay. She sits back and looks at me instantly, her forehead creasing. So, Tate, do you know why you're here? Yes. You're accused of murder of... I know, I say quickly. I know what I'm here for. And how do you feel about that? She asks. Are you doing okay? I look back at her, surprised. It's strange how everyone's asking me how I am when they think I killed someone. I suppose I'd expected a little bit more hate. I'm okay, I say, a bit shaken up, but I just know they were going to arrest me for this. Yes, Sarah moves her finger across the trackpad and narrows her eyes as she peers down her laptop. You made a statement, you told the police, and you told witnesses at the scene that you'd been in the deceased inside the building, that you were there with her before she died. You told them that it was all your fault. She looks up at me, questioningly. I didn't mean it. I shake my head. I was confused. I thought. Her eyes moved back to the page. And then you retracted that. You said that you didn't even know she was in the building. I lower my head into my hands. I didn't. But you were there. Yes, I was there, I agreed. In the building. At the same time. But I wasn't with her. I didn't do anything wrong. I told the police that. But they didn't believe me. No, she agrees. Look, I can't explain any of this. I don't know how or why it happened. Well, I have a theory, but it's kind of crazy. It's pretty much off the wall, in fact. She looks at me, hard in the eye. Tate, I have to warn you. If you had any involvement in this, you need to say nothing. You need to stay silent. Do you understand? No. I need to tell them, I protest. I'm innocent. I didn't do this. I need to tell them my side of things. You already told them your side of things. But they didn't believe me. They arrested me. Exactly, she says. So you're telling me your side of things doesn't necessarily mean they're going to let you go. It doesn't work like that. And as you've already discovered, it can end up tying you in knots. But I'm innocent. Then tell me about it, she says, and let me advise you. That's what I'm here for. I pull the blanket closely around my shoulders. Although I'm warming up nicely now, I can feel my feet. I can think again. She moves her laptop towards her and waits for me, her eyes lowered, her shoulders poised. I sigh. I don't know where to start, I tell her. Start from the beginning, she says. Part 1. Chapter 1. Friday, the 9th of December. I weaved my way through the crowded room towards the glass door that led out onto the terrace. Spirits were high, and the Christmas karaoke was in full swing. My line manager, Dan, and his PA, Hayley, had just done a not too shoddy Elton John and Kiki D. Now, our CEO, Jerry Seeger, was up, singing Elvis, emboldened by a captive audience and a quantity of vodka. He'd pulled open his shirt buttons and was gyrating his hips in an enthusiastic parody of the King. The bar was on top floor of a 25-story office block in the heart of City London. As I reached the door, I spotted several people from the department congregating in the smoking area outside. I stopped short. I'd had my fill of idle office chit-chat. In truth, there was no one at the back that I connected with other than Dan and Haley, perhaps. I had no interest in the associates' cars and their skiing holidays, or who was in line for the biggest bonus, and they definitely had no interest in me, in my acting career. I crept past them round the corner and climbed the narrow fire escape up to the upper level of the roof terrace. The cold air was sobering, as was the view. When I got to the top, I could see the white lights of Tower Bridge twinkling in the distance. The river beyond snaking its way eastwards towards the docks behind me, across the water to my right. The Shard rose out of the night, its lower levels shrouded into the darkness, its tip congruously bright. I lit a cigarette and breathed in deeply for a moment, enjoyed the view and solitude. When I'd finished, I stepped forward, moving a little nearer to the wall of the terrace, curious to see how close I could get. What the view was like was down there in the street below. I've never been good with heights. I felt my knees weaken, but something perseveres inside me was drawing me closer to the edge. It was as if I was daring my own brain to stop me from jumping. Someone once told me that this is the true meaning of vertigo. I reached a railing that bordered the building. I gripped it tight and peered over, and there it was, that long, sheer drop. I felt my stomach somersault as I looked down for a moment or two. And then to my right, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. A woman with dark, wavy hair. She climbed up one of the angled skylines and over the railings and was sitting on the other side of the ledge of the wall, her legs dangling in the air. I hesitated. "Hey!" I called out to her. "I really don't think you should be sitting up there." She didn't answer. I moved closer. "Seriously," I spoke quickly, feeling giddy. "It's not safe. You're going to fall." She turned her head and looked at me. "Can you just leave me, please?" I hesitated. "I don't think I should. I just want to. I need a minute." "And then you'll come down?" She hesitated, turned her back to me, then shook her head. I felt myself shiver. "If you're thinking about jumping, please don't." She didn't answer. "Come on," I said gently. "Things can't be that bad." Her voice wobbled and cracked slightly as she said, "Oh yeah? You want to bet?" She picked up a bottle of wine that was in the wall next to her and tipped back her head and took a long slug. "Do you want to talk about it?" I persisted. "There's nothing to say," she answered. "I've fucked up everything. I've really fucked up." "How have you fucked up?" Her shoulders shook and she started to cry. I said quickly, "Look, my life's a complete car wreck. I should be the one jumping." She didn't answer. "Seriously," I said. "I'm a 38-year-old out-of-work actress / office temp / dog's body. I live on my own with my cat." She looked around. "You're an actress?" "Yeah," I said, relieved I got her attention. "Well, I'm trying to be." "What have you been in?" "Nothing you've heard of," I admitted. "Have you been on the telly?" "One advert, years ago." "Which one?" "Carpet Palace. I was the woman on the flying carpet. The one that flew through the window and landed in the couple's living room." She looked at me blankly. "Yeah. Anyway, I haven't had any decent work in years. I'm 21 grand in debt. I'm not qualified to do anything except act. Actually, that's not true. I have an OCR level 2 typing, but my speed sucks. And I have RSI. So I do a lot of photocopying and scanning and shredding which I knew I was prattling will be really useful if I ever get a part as an insanely bored office temp. But in the meantime, it's totally, insanely fucking boring. And guess what? My brothers and sisters are all married with kids and they're all multi-millionaires. Seriously? Seriously. I nodded. Every one of them. They all have the big house, the nice car, the designer clothes, the expensive holidays. I paused. They're living the dream. And then there's me. The woman stretched out her arm and offered me the wine bottle. I stepped forward, reached up, and took it from her. Are they really all millionaires? She asked. They really are. I wiped the rim of the bottle with my sleeve and took a slug of wine. I'm not kidding. One of my sisters owned a chain of hotels, and my oldest brother floated his company out on the stock markets before the crash and pocketed 50 million. He went from being rich to super rich overnight. If they're so rich, why don't they help you pay off your debts? They all ganged up and came to an agreement that they wouldn't do that. They think I need to get my shit together, learn to help myself. She nodded slowly. Nice. My phone bleeped. I pulled it out of my pocket and looked on the screen. Boyfriend? She asked. I shook my head. It's just Amazon. Delivery tomorrow. What have you ordered? Shoes, I said. She nodded again and started crying. It's a bit late, to be honest, I said. I wanted them for the party. She cried harder. Hey! I moved closer. At least you have a boyfriend. She sobbed. At least you have a fucking boyfriend. What? I frowned. What makes you think I have a boyfriend? She hesitated. That message you just got. From Amazon. Oh yeah, okay. How drunk was she? So, do you have a boyfriend? She was looking hard at me, waiting for my answer. She was wobbling on the wall. Panic spread through me. I wanted to say no, but I didn't want to lie either. What if Dan came up here looking for me? Sort of, I admitted. She sniffed. What does that mean? There's someone, I confessed, but he's not really my boyfriend. How is he not really your boyfriend? I hesitated. He's married. She looked at me, unblinking. See what I mean? I said. Car wreck. She thought about this for a minute. While the wind lifted the corner of her coat and smacked it against her thigh, she pushed it down. Do you love him? Yes. Does he love you? I don't know. Maybe. So there's hope. She slurred. You have hope. He's married, I reminded her. He has a daughter who he adores. He's never going to leave his wife. How do you know? I googled it. She smiled, suddenly through her tears. You googled it? Oh, I google how many times men leave their wives, and it's only like 5% or something. Her grin widened. What? I asked, smiling back. She shrugged. I don't know. Sorry. That just sounded funny. It's what you do when you're desperate. Tell me about it, she said. I watched her in silence for a moment. She didn't move, but I felt we'd made progress. I didn't want to blow it by saying the wrong thing. Eventually, she sniffed and wiped her eyes. She asked, Can I have one of your cigarettes? I quickly pulled the packet from my bag and held it out to her. She reached for it, her fingers not quite touching it. I can't. Quite. Can you move closer? Come down, I begged her. Please, where do you live? Maybe we can share a cab home, or we could go and find a bar or something. We can talk some more. She considered this for a moment in silence, and then, to my surprise, she turned, gripping the railings, and levelled herself up on her knees on the wall. She ducked down through the railing and slid down the skylight. I quickly moved next to her, positioning myself between her and the wall. I tapped out a cigarette. I passed it to her, flickered my lighter and lit it for her, and then held out the wine bottle. She took it, breathed out a plume of smoke, took a slug of wine. "What's your name?" she asked me. "Tate." She frowned. "Come again?" "Tate. Tate. Unusual." "Yeah, I think my parents were hoping it would make me interesting. There's Fern, Heath, Blair, Skye, and me." "What about you?" "Helen." "Oh, get you. You have syllables." She pressed her lips together and sucked in her cheeks. "My surname's Back." I looked at her, straight face. Helen Back. I didn't dare laugh. She was still too close to the edge of the building. She could yet change her mind, clamber back up the skyline, and throw herself off. "Just kidding. It's Jones." She grinned and let out another plum of smoke. I smiled back at her, relieved. "So, tell me about this married man," she said. I hesitated. "Who do you work for?" "What? Do you work for CPF?" "Who?" "The French bank I work for. We're on levels 12 to 19. It's our party night. That's going on in the bar tonight." She shook her head. "No." "So which floor are you?" She took a puff of her cigarette. "The 10th." "10th?" I scratched my head. "Is that Cohen Macaulay?" "I'm just a temp," she said. "I don't really know anyone." I tapped a cigarette out of the pack and lit it. "Me too. It sucks, doesn't it? No one really bothers getting to know you. It's like we're invisible." "So why are you here?" I shrugged. "Office Christmas party. I have to make the efforts, don't you?" She crushed her cigarette butt with her shoe. "Dunno. I don't see why, if you're only temping." "It's long term," I told her. "I've been here 4 months already." I paused, then said, "Okay, truth is, the guy I'm seeing." I flipped my head towards the building. "He's inside. I work with him. He's my boss." She pressed her lips together, shook her head knowingly. "Yep," I said. "So that's why I'm here. Only it's pointless, really. He never talks to me when we're at work. In fact, he makes a point of avoiding me. So you're right. I don't really know why I came." She passed me the bottle. I took a slug and passed it back again. "What about you?" I asked her. "Why are you here?" "I came to throw myself off the roof, remember?" "Shit, sorry," I said. "But you're not going to do that anymore." She looked wistfully away towards the tip of the Shard. "You kind of put me off." I gently touched her arm. "Come on, let's call a cab. Things may look different in the morning." "I doubt it." "Well, if they don't, you can call me, okay?" "Seriously?" "Yeah, seriously. Give me your phone." She pulled her phone out of her pocket and handed it to me. I tapped in my number and pressed send. My phone bleeped and I handed hers back to her. She looked at me quizzically. "Why do you care?" I said, "Because whatever you think you've done, or not done, you seem like a nice person," I added with a smile. "And anyway, us office temps have to stick together, don't we?" She thought about this for a moment, then shuffled forwards. She lowered herself off the skylight and jumped onto the roof next to me. Chapter 2. Monday, 19th of December. My lawyer, Sarah, stops typing. "So, she worked on the 10th floor?" "No." I shake my head. She lied. She didn't really work there. She didn't work at... Sarah swipes the trackpad and scrolls up. Cohen Macaulay. And she didn't work on the 10th floor. She didn't work in the building. Oh, I see. Her eyes flicker up to mine. So, why did she lie? She shouldn't have been there. She blagged her way in. And why did she do that? I look her in the eye. She wanted to kill herself. That's what she did. That's what she said. There are other ways to kill yourself. I nod. But she knew the building. She was confident she could find a way in. And 225 East Cheap is high enough to... I pause and close my eyes for a moment before opening them again. It's 100 metres high. 300 feet. That's just about optimal, apparently. It's pretty much the perfect height if you want a guarantee that you won't survive the fall. But you also don't want too much time to think about it on the way down. Sarah frowns. She told you all of this? I look at the table. Yeah. It should have been an alarm bell. All of it. Her instability, her lies. But I felt sorry for her, and I liked her. She had a bit of life about her. I look up. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say in the circumstances, but she didn't seem crazy. She just seemed like someone normal who got molded and drunk too much. There was something unhinged about her. I guess I wasn't completely convinced that she was serious about jumping. Well, I can see why you're drawn the conclusion. You managed to talk her down. Yeah, I snort. And look where it got me. So, if she didn't work there, how did she get in? She said the guy on the door remembered her face, that she'd worked in the building a couple months previously. It was that evening. There was a party. She somehow convinced him that she was someone's +1 and he let her in. I can't get into the bar or onto any floors without a pass, so I guess he saw no harm. So they had more security upstairs on the door of the bar, and beyond that, there wasn't really anywhere else she could go, except the roof terrace. Yes, you can access it directly from the 25th floor, without having to go through the bar. There was no security cameras on the roof either, of course. And she'd know that. I guess she made it her business to find out. Sarah glances across the sheet of paper that's on the table beside her laptop. So, 225 East Cheap is the high-rise building with 25 floors. Can you tell me a bit more? Like what? Describe it to me. Okay. Well, there's a lot of different companies there. It has a gym in the basement and a bar at the top. I think some of the floors have even sleep pods. No one really works late or at weekends at the bank, I explain. But some of the US law firms in the building work into the night. What about security? She asked, still typing this up. There's a security office with cameras on the ground floor to the left as you go in. And then there's a desk next to the lower level turnstile where the security guys also sit. During the week, in the daytime, you usually have to flash your pass at them as you go through the turnstile. And then you can go up and down, but you need your pass again to get into the corridors on the different floors. It seems as though this woman went to a lot of trouble, she says, lifting her eyes from the screen to her laptop. I nod. I know. I agree. She looks into the eyes searchingly. Go on. You managed to talk her down from the roof. What happened next? I called a cab. We went down the stairs, all 25 flights because she said she had a phobia about lifts. And then we went home. We dropped her off first. She was on my way. Or she said. What do you mean? She said she lived in Kerrick Place, just off Baker Street. I'm in Paddington, so it made sense to share a cab and split the fare. So the cab stopped in Kendrick Place. She got out. We said goodbye. She said she was okay. She seemed okay. I told her again to call if she needed to talk. And did she? Yes, she did, the very next day. Chapter 3. Saturday, the 10th of December. The following morning, the morning after the party, I'd woken early, but I dozed a little and didn't get out of bed until noon. I made tea and toast, then spent the afternoon lounging on the sofa, eating crisps and watching an old Hitchcock thriller. I'd exchanged messages with Dan. I'd tell Sarah, which had left me feeling alternately thrilled and dejected. He was on his way over. We'd spent the evening together. I'd go out for groceries. I'd cook. Don't go to any trouble, he said. Things were a little tricky at the moment with Emily, his daughter. He probably wouldn't be able to stay long. A takeout, then, and a nice bottle of wine. It was settled. I'd have a bath and wash the dishes, hoover the flat and empty the bins. Then another message. Something's come up, he said. He couldn't come over after all. I messaged him back, worried. What's happened? It's nothing, he said. Nothing to worry about, but Maddie, his wife, had to go into the city to meet someone. It was important. He now needed to stay at home. He had to look after Emily. I knew all about Emily. She was 15 and old enough to be left home alone for a few hours. But she was going through a rebellious phase, running with the wrong crowd, smoking and drinking and God knows what else. These kids she was hanging out with were a bad influence. One evening she'd managed to sneak out without her parents knowing and hadn't come home until dawn. Dan and Maddie had been beside themselves with worry. Dan needed to keep an eye on her. If he went out for the evening, then so would she. She was meant to be grounded. Any chance she could get out and she'd be off. We ended the call. I swallowed a couple of headache pills, lay back on the sofa and dozed lightly for a while. When I woke up again, I felt listless and low. I should do something for the weekend, arrange something, but I'd left it too late. All of my friends would have plans. They didn't know about Dan. I was too ashamed to tell them. They wouldn't approve. But even so, I didn't want any of them to think that they were the last minute option. So, when my phone rang, I saw that it was Helen. I was quite glad of the diversion. Hello, Tate, she said, speaking rapidly, her voice unsteady. I'm really sorry about this, but I need to get to the point. I've lost an earring. I've looked everywhere, but I can't find it. It must have fallen out last night. Oh no, I said. Were they expensive? They're diamonds, she exclaimed, almost accusing. They're precious, unique, and irreplaceable. They were the last thing my gran gave to me before she died. They're... She paused. Then I heard a sob. They're all I have left for her. I have to find it. I have to give it back. Do you want me to call a cab company? I asked. See if the driver last night can take a look at the back of his cab. No, she cut me off sharply. I've done that already, but it's no good. They say it's not there. Okay, well, God, I'm sorry, I told her. I don't know what else to suggest. The office, Eastcheap. We need to go back to the building and check. Now, will you come with me? I thought about this for a moment. It was Saturday evening. That was quite a big ask, I wanted to say. Can't you wait until Monday? But I was guessing it couldn't. Or she wouldn't have suggested it. I suppose the sooner Helen retracted her steps, the more chance she had of finding her earring. But why does she need me? Well, I suppose I could, I began, but... Would you? She interrupted gratefully. And can you bring security pass? I can't find mine. I think I might have dropped that too. I'm not going to be able to get in otherwise. I hesitated. The rules of CPF were strict. Although it was a bank, there was no money on the premises. But even so, I wasn't meant to swipe someone else in. I'd only just met Helen. I barely knew her. I didn't really feel comfortable about this, but On the other hand, she sounded desperate, and I didn't feel comfortable with that either. I'd say she could call on me, hadn't I? And besides, there should be someone from security behind the desk. If they haven't found her pass and they didn't like the idea of going into the building, she could just wait for me in the lobby while I went up and looked for the earrings on my own. Okay, I finally agreed. After all, it wasn't as if I had anything better to do. My car's outside. I can pick you up on the way if you like. Don't worry. I'm in the cab already. I'm round the corner from you. I'll be there in, 5 minutes. You're on the way to my place? Yes. Is that okay? How do you know where I live? A pause. Park East, Sussex Garden. That's right? Yeah, that's right. You told me last night, don't you remember? No, I confessed. But, okay, see you in a minute then. I dressed hurriedly in my jeans and a thick sweater, opened a tin of sherbet for George, and grabbed my work security pass. When I got down to the entrance, a cab was idling outside, and Helen was leaning out the back window, smiling and waving. She seemed much calmer. Forget the car, we'll take the cab there, she smiled. If we find that earring, I'm going to be buying you a very large drink. I got into the back of the taxi next to her. She gave the driver the office address. Did you call security? I asked her as we headed through Mayfair on our way to the city. She looked worried. No? Why? I shrugged. You meant to give them heads up so they know who to expect in the building. You know, so they can put the main lights on and stuff. At 6 p.m. on a Saturday. I don't know who in security is going to be there. Well, that's okay. You have the pass, don't you? We can get in. We won't be long. And the lights are motion censored, aren't they? We'll be able to see. Sure, but I still think we should call security. I reached for my phone. She hesitated and then said, Please don't call them. I frowned. Why not? Well, it will just be easier, won't it? It will save me getting to the 3rd degree. They might have your pass, though. Someone might have handed it in, I pointed out. And they might have handed in your earring too. Don't you at least want to ask? Helen turned and gazed out the window in the silence for a moment, and then turned back to me and said, Look, Tate, I don't want you to call security. I don't have a pass. The thing is, I don't actually work there anymore. What? What do you mean? She sighed and looked down into her lap. Okay, so, you know I told you how I fucked everything up. That was one of the things I fucked up. I lost my job. So you don't work there? No, I used to. I used to work for Cohen McCurney on the 10th floor, like I said. But then I got fired. When? A couple of months ago. Oh, God. Right, I see. I glanced across at her. She turned her head and looked out the window. I followed her gaze. We'd reached Victoria Embankment, and I could see the Waterloo Bridge up ahead. We were probably only another 15 minutes away from the office. I wanted to know why she'd been fired, but at the same time, I didn't want to drag up the post and upset her. So, what were you doing there then, last night? Helen dipped her chin and made are you really asking me that face? You went there just to, I began, kill myself. Yes. But that's insane. I know. I hesitated, taking this in. But how did you get past security then? I knew a guy on the door. He liked me, she admitted. We always flirted a little, you know. I told him I was there for the CPF party, gave him the name of one of the secretaries, said I was meeting her in the bar. He radioed up to one of the guys on the door upstairs and I looked up sharply. Hang on a minute. Which secretary? Hayley Albright. You know her? My heart leaped. She's my boss's PA. Ah, yes, Dan, the man. She smiled and raised her eyebrows knowingly. I stared back at her in dismay. Oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? Talking to a complete stranger about me and Dan. I didn't think you knew anyone from CPF. I cleared my throat. I asked you and you said, well, you didn't seem to know who. Never mind, I said. So is she a friend of yours? Who? Hayley. Oh no. She looked at me sheepishly. I just said that to get in. But you know her. Well, yeah. How? How'd you know her? Helen turned to face me, and then her eyes widened. Oh, God, you're worried. You think I'm going to... I felt her hand on my arm. Tate, I met her in the bar a couple months ago, that's all. It was shortly before I got the sack. We just got chatting and I told her things weren't going too well at Cohen Macaulay. She said there was openings at CPF that I should call if I wanted her to put a word in for me. She gave me a number, and that was that. And did you? I persisted. Did I what? Call her? No, I didn't call her. Why not? She frowned and moved her hand away from my arm. Because I didn't. I didn't want another job. Not at this particular time. Things were really bad for me. Her eyes misted up. Right. It's okay, I said quickly. You don't have to tell me. And you don't have to worry, she said, her eyes wet but shiny. I'm not going to tell anyone what you told me last night. My stomach jolted a little. What did I tell her? I cast my mind back to the previous evening. Oh, Christ! It was all coming back to me now. There was a second conversation about Dan. Now I remember. I talked about him a lot. She reached out to me again and took hold of my hand, gripping it tight. I meant what I said, Tate, honestly. I looked back at her apprehensively. What did you say exactly? That your secret's safe with me, 100%. I shifted in my seat. We were both a little the worse for wear on the ride home last night. I knew that, but until now I'd thought she was in a far worse state than me, and yet it seemed she remembered more of the conversation than I did. And now that she brought it up, what she was saying was ringing an uncomfortable bell. So, who else do you know from CPF? I asked, my heart racing a little. No one, she reassured me. I told you, I didn't go for the party. That was just an excuse to get in. But what if someone had recognised you? Who? It was a CPF party. What about Hayley? She shrugged. Like I said, I barely know her. I'd have just made an excuse. I stared at her in silence for a moment. I'm on your side, Tate, she insisted. I'm not going to tell anyone, really. And I'm not going to try and top myself again either, if that's what you're wondering. I took a breath. Honestly? Honestly, I just want to find my earring. Last night was then, and this is now. She turned to face me. I wanted to be with my gran, she explained softly. She was my rock. I missed her so much. I just thought that it was what I wanted, but you really helped me, Tate. I realised after talking with you that there's always someone whose life is more fucked up than yours. Her mouth curved into a smile. Something like that, she said. Chapter 4. When we pulled up outside 22 East Cheap, Helen followed me out of the cab and through the revolving glass door into the lobby. There was in fact no one from security at the desk, and for a brief moment I hesitated while Helen watched me expectantly, her eyes on me. I then pushed aside her reservations and swiped us both through the turnstile and into the inner quadrant. I paused outside the lift, but then Helen shook her head and said, We came down the stairs, remember? We walked on along the corridor, past the glass-walled courtyard, and through the double doors to the front of the stairwell. Helen stopped as the lights blinked on and glanced up at the cavernous ceiling above us. "I feel bad," she said, "making you walk up all these stairs. Why don't you go back and get the lift up to 25th floor? You can check the roof terrace for me and then make your way down the stairs while I start here and work my way up. We can meet halfway or whatever. It'll save time, won't it? And it'll save my legs and yours." I hesitated, feeling uneasy again. I was responsible for her being in the building, so I really ought to stay with her. But on the other hand, what she suggested made a lot of sense. She wanted to find her earring, and would do that quicker if we split the search into two. There was virtually nowhere she could go without a pass, after all, and the thought that was hovering at the back of my mind. There was no way she could get to the roof terrace before I did. Not if I was taking the lift, and she had to walk up 25 flights of stairs. "Okay," I agreed. "Why don't we say I'll meet you in the stairwell on the 15th, or somewhere around there? Or you can just stop on the stairs when you get tired and wait for me to come down." She nodded. "Sounds like a plan." "Don't go into any corridors, will ya?" I asked her. "I'm sure this goes without saying, but if the cleaners or anyone else comes along and open the door for you, you mustn't go in." "Of course not," Helen reassured me. "Why would I? I didn't go onto any of the floors yesterday. If I see the cleaners, I'll ask them if they found anything, but otherwise I'll leave you to speak to them on Monday. That sound okay?" "Sure, I'll definitely ask around on Monday. Just don't do anything or go anywhere that will get me into trouble. Will you?" I pleaded. "I promise." She smiled, nodding her head again vigorously. "I'll be right here." She gave me a description of a missing earring, glanced around the floor intently, and then headed off up the stairs. Scanning each step as she went, I walked back through the doors to the inner quadrant and pressed the button for the lift. It arrived within a minute and took me straight up to the 25th floor. I passed the entrance to the bar, peeping in through the glass. It was locked, empty. I then remembered that Helen had said she'd gone the other way round the quadrant to avoid the door staff at the bar. So I turned and retraced my steps. I carried on the emergency exit and the inner fire escape that took me onto the floor, scanning the ground as I went. Up on the roof, it was cold and dark, with just a single monitor sensor emergency light casting a weak white spotlight onto the immediate vicinity. Across to my right, I could see the tip of the Shard, all lit up, a beacon in the night sky, but the vast majority of the roof was in darkness. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, switched on to torch, and retraced the approximate steps that Helen and I had taken that previous night. I flashed the beam over the skylight and onto the wall, then down over the ground where our feet had been. I spotted the wine bottle, which was still on the concrete beside the skylight, along with our cigarette butts, so it didn't look as though anyone had been up here to clean. But it was hard to see much, and it was also a little frightening. I could see the edge of the building, but it was too close for comfort in the half-light from my phone. I resolved to tell Helen that I'd do a further search on Monday. Maybe get security up here. Maybe then get them to take a proper look. I headed back down into the building, flashing my torch around into the corners of the stairwell, the house, the fire escape, and then walked back along the corridor, past the bar this time, and then past the lift. I turned the corner and went through the door of the main staircase. I leaned over the banisters and peered down to look on the stairwell to listen for Helen, but I couldn't hear any sound. I guess that means she must still be much further down. The emergency lights on the stairs were better than the ones on the roof terrace, but I scanned the concrete steps with my torch anyway, shining the beam back and forth and into the corners as well. When I got to the 15th floor, I peered down again and called out Helen's name. My voice echoed down the stairwell, but I got no answer. I leaned onto the banister and waited silently for a moment, and then continued down to the 14th, 13th, and then the 12th, where I leaned over the banisters again. "Helen!" I called. "Are you there?" There was no answer. I walked over the door to the corridor and peered through. I wondered if the cleaners were on one of these floors and whether she'd seen them through the window and, for whatever reason, had gone somewhere else to look for the earring instead. I pulled out my phone and found out Helen's number and pressed the call button. It went to voicemail. I started feeling uneasy again. Where was she? She must have gone back downstairs, I concluded. There was no other way. My heart sank, and I contemplated the possibility that she'd been followed in and questioned by security. Or maybe she found the earring. Yes, maybe she found it straight away and was waiting for me on the ground floor. My spirits lifted a little. I hurried on down, not bothering to look for the earring anymore. When I got to the ground floor, I called Helen's name one last time, then opened the door that led to the quadrant. I walked over to the turnstile and peered across the seating area in the lobby. There was no one there, nor was there anyone sitting at the security desk. I looked across to the office, trying to catch sight of any movement inside, but the door was closed. Maybe she was in there, being questioned by security. Maybe she had been full-marched out of the building. Oh, God, I could just imagine Dan Solomon face, his forehead etched with disappointment as he told me that I'd really fucked things up for him. Maybe he'd even say he had no option to let me go. I glanced around the quadrant towards the high glass window that bordered the small, incapability manicured courtyard to my left. I walked over to the door and pushed the security bar, and then with my eyes moved across to the lift. All of a sudden, it hit me. What if it was just bullshit about her having a phobia? What if the missing earring was all a ruse? What if she'd simply waited for me to check the roof terrace, come out at the top of the stairwell, and then she'd heard me call down, she'd come back out here and taken the lift straight up to the roof? Anxiety clawed at my gut. I ran over to the lift and glanced at the indicator above. It was on the 25th floor. But that's where I left it. So that didn't mean anything, did it? I hammered on the button and hammered again and hammered and waited a moment. I put my ear to the door of the lift shaft and listened. I hammered and hammered at the button repeatedly while staring up at the indicator light, but it remained lit up on the 25th floor. I froze. What should I do? Should I alert security? But then what if Helen had just gone to the toilet or was waiting outside the building? And if the lift was stuck or worse, had been switched off? What could security do anyway, except run up 25 flights of stairs with me? I turned, looked back past the turnstile towards the entrance through the glass that fronted the building, imagining a glimpse of Helen under the streetlight outside. Then I ran back through the door to the staircase and launched myself up and round, one hand on the rail, my handbag slipping off my shoulder and down my arm and flapping against my leg. Up I went. I counted the floors. 4th, 5th, 6th. I glanced up through the stairwell. 7th, 8th, 9th. By the 12th I was completely out of breath. I paused momentarily and wiped my damp forehead with my sleeve. Pulled my thick sweater off and then carried on up. Finally, I reached the top and crashed. Panting through the double doors, I ran past the door. The lift doors were open, but I didn't stop to find out why. I rushed through the fire exit door and clattered up the escape and out onto the roof. Helen, I called, my voice loud in cold, still air. It's me, Tate. Are you here? There was no reply. The security lights blinked as I ran forward, and its beam caught a glimmer of something shining on the concrete ahead of me. I pulled my phone out of the pocket and tapped the torch on, moving closer, pointing it. It was glass, broken glass, all over the ground. I hesitated, confused. Had it been there before? I couldn't remember. I shone the torch towards the wall to the place I'd last seen the wine bottle. It was gone. My heart pounded. I waved the torch back and forth around the roof terrace in a wide, desperate arc. I could see what looked like a neck wine bottle lying on the ground near the skylight. I stepped unsteadily around it, towards the edge of the building, grabbed the railing tight, and looked over. An ice-cold chill ran through me. There was something. It was dark. But down on the pavement lit by a nearby streetlight there was a pile of something. A small crowd had gathered and traffic had come to a halt in the middle of the road. People were calling out and someone were pacing up and down. Drivers were getting out of their cars. I felt my fingers slip and slide as I lost grip of my railing. It was obvious, whilst I wished with every fibre of my being that it wasn't true, that this wasn't happening. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind. Someone was lying broken on the pavement below. Chapter 5. Monday, the 19th of December. Sarah reaches into her bag and pulls out a pack of tissues. She pushes them across to the table towards me, then waits while I lower my head and sob into my arms. When I stop crying and look up at her again, she asks, "Did you know then it was her?" "No." I pull a tissue out of the pack in front of me and unfold it. I'm shivering. I have to cross my arms and clutch my shoulders to keep them still. I tried to get to her, but there was already a crowd of people around her. The security guard from our building was outside, and there were other security guards from other buildings telling people to get back. No one would let me near her. I tried to explain what had happened, but it came out all wrong. I blamed myself. I didn't know then what I know now. Sarah pulls her laptop towards her and swipes the trackpad, and then presses her lips together while she squints at the screen in front of her for a moment or two. "So, what are you saying, Tate?" She lifts her eyes to meet mine. "You think that Helen did this to frame you? To set you up?" "Yes," I agree, then watching her face. "Maybe, I don't know. But why? Why would she do that?" "I honestly don't know. I have a theory, but you probably won't believe it." I hesitated. I don't even know if I believe it myself. Sarah keeps her eyes fixed on mine. Then she leans back in her chair and folds her arm. "I'm going to be completely honest with you," she says. "What I'm struggling with here is why anyone would believe a story like that in the first place. The missing earring, the missing security pass. It seems so obviously contrived. I know, I'm a bloody idiot." I start to cry. I'm not saying that, Tate. We all do foolish things, and of course, hindsight is a wonderful thing. I'm just trying to understand why you would put yourself in a position like that for a complete stranger. "Because I'm lonely," I cry out. "Because I live on my own with a cat. Because I have no one to talk to, or at least no one whose life is as messed up as mine." Okay, she murmurs. And she wasn't a complete stranger, I argue. At least I didn't think at the time. She used to work for Coe McCauley, and she knew Haley. That's what she told me. She knew Haley's name, but she didn't work for Coe and Wiley, did she? I shake my head. I honestly don't know. Dan spoke to someone in their HR department last week, and they said they couldn't release that information to him. Data protection, apparently. We'd have to make this disclosure application, Sarah agrees. But what about Haley? What does she have to say? I wipe my eyes. She never heard of her. Dan spoke to her. She didn't remember meeting anyone called Helen from Coe and McCauley in the bar. Sarah nods slowly. I notice she's not typing up what I'm saying anymore. She was a good liar, I insist. I know it sounds obvious now, but she was really convincing about the earring. And she was really upset. I hesitate. Okay, I suppose deep down, if I'm being honest with myself, I knew that something wasn't quite right. But by the time she admitted that she didn't actually work for Cohen McCauley anymore, I was worrying more about Dan, whether she would tell Haley or someone else about us. And by the time we got to the office, I was feeling pretty snookered. I mean, if I didn't swipe her in and let her look for the earrings, she might be angry with me, and then what should she do? I guess I just wanted to keep her on side. That's all I could really think about. There's a knock at the door. A custody assistant enters. "Sorry to interrupt," she says, "but the Sarge says we need to take your client for documentation now." Sarah advises me to cooperate, and so I stand up and follow the custody assistant out of the door. We go down a corridor through the custody suite and into the brightly lit side room. The custody assistant takes me towards the in-frame scanning machine, where she takes each of my fingers and presses them down onto the scanning pad, rolling them from left to right to create a fingerprint impression on the computer screen. It's uncomfortable, but I follow the instructions, nodding and pressing as she does this for all my fingers, thumbs, palms, and the sides of my hands. I sit still for my photograph to be taken, then open my mouth wide while he swabs it. All the while, I'm conscious of Sarah, who is standing in the doorway watching in silence, her presence simultaneously comforting and discomforting. She's good, I can tell. She's in my corner. That's her job. She's looking out for me. But does she believe me? That's the question. If she doesn't believe me, then nobody will. The police won't. Why would they? If they're prime suspect, I must be, or they wouldn't have arrested me. I'll be charged and sent to prison without question, and then it starts up again. The same series of terrifying images, the same series of questions that have been playing on the loop since the police banged on my front door and arrested me. Can I do this? Can I really do this? Am I strong enough? Do I have what it takes to see it through? When the custody assistant is finished with me, the female detective comes in and asks for a passcode on my phone. Sarah had already told me that I don't have to give it to them, but there can be consequences to refusing, and they can break into it anyway. I give the password to the detective. In exchange, I'm given a plastic cup of weak tea and a hot microwave meal that's meant to be lasagna, and am shown back to the consultant's room. Sarah follows, sits back down, opens her laptop. I slide onto the bench opposite her. "Okay," she asks. "Yes." Sarah swipes. The trackpad clicks appears on the screen in front of her. "So, you were up on the roof terrace, you looked over the railing, and you saw someone on the ground below." I nod. Her keyboard clickety-clacks as she types. Her eyes flicker between me and the screen. And then I run down, wipe my eyes. Or do I get the lift? I can't even remember. I was in such a state. I just remember that the security guy was outside. He wouldn't let me near her. I shake my head, bewildered. And then the police arrived. Chapter 6. September, the 10th of December. Inside 225 East Cheap. I pushed at the revolving door, but it wouldn't open. The security guy must have locked it. My heart was hammering in my chest and my knees were weak. I could see through the glass that a small crowd had gathered. It was the weekend and the streets weren't that busy. But the commission had drawn what people there were out for nearby shops and bars. I could hear a siren in the near distance, getting louder and louder. I tried again to get the door open, but it was stuck. So I ran back through the turnstile, along the corridor, and back through the double doors to the stairs, then went down a level to the lower ground floor, where I remembered there was an exit at the back of the building past the gym that led into the underground car park. I let myself out and hurried through the car park, then ran up the slope and out onto the street behind. When I rounded the corner into East Cheap, people were miling around the pavement and on the road or standing, talking in small groups, hands over their mouths, expressions their shock and disbelief on their faces. One or two people had their phones out. To my disgust, were holding them up in the air. I had crossed the road, then began to push my way through the group, but my path was blocked. There were more than one security guard present, including the one from our building. He put his hands out and said forcefully, "Stop! You can't come through here!" Another male voice called out to me, irritated, "Step back, please! Move away!" You don't understand, I shrieked. I was with her. The security guard took hold of my arm and steered me gently back the way I just can. I was in the building with her. I swallowed a sob. You know her? The woman who fell? The woman asked. Yes, I turned to face her. I didn't realise. I didn't mean for this to happen. Oh God, this is all my fault. You'll need to wait for the police, said the security guard, looking me up and down. Wait here, please. I did as I was told. I waited, and then the police and ambulances were there. Bright lights, vehicles moving in and blocking the roads, uniforms everywhere, paramedics swooping in with equipment, police coordinating off the streets and dispensing the crowd. Then I noticed a security guard pointing at me. A uniformed police officer appeared by my side. I understand you may know the victim, he asked me. Yes, I replied breathlessly. I was there. I was with her before, not when when she jumped. She jumped. I nodded. I think so. I'd like to take a statement from you straight away, the officer said. Is that all right with you? Yes, of course. I walked with him to a police car. He opened the passenger door for me and indicated for me to get inside. I lowered myself into the seat and waited while he talked to the colleague. I never sat in a police car before. I stared out into the darkness of the road in front of me, at the headlights of the emergency vehicles. It was dark and light at the same time, and I felt as though I was dreaming, or had got caught up in someone else's nightmare, more like. The officer spoke to another officer, who turned and squinted at me through the windscreen. My officer then walked back to the car and got into the driver's seat next to me. His radio crackled. He lifted his hand, flickered a switch, and it fell silent. In the gleam of the headlight, I could see someone in a paper suit bending over and someone being put in a plastic bag. I realised that it was her shoe, and I suddenly felt sick. The officer took a notebook out of the pocket in his vest. So, can I start by taking your name? I turned to look at him. He was a thin man in his 50s, with glasses and grey hair. I'm sorry, I said, putting my hand over my mouth, but I need to. I quickly opened the door, hung my head out, and threw up on the side of the road. It's the shock, he said, when I sat back up. It's a natural reaction. I'll get the paramedics to check you over there. It's okay, I'm okay. I fished in my pocket for a tissue and wiped my mouth. Do you need some water? He asked. Sorry. It's alright, I'm okay, I repeated, and took a few deep breaths. My name's Tate Kinsella, I said finally. T-A-T-E, Kinsella. He wrote this down. Occupation? I work there. I pointed to the building. I'm an office worker. I work for a French bank on the 14th floor. It's Saturday. You were working today? No, but I went into the office, I added. I went with her. We both looked ahead through the windscreen to where the paramedics were kneeling, surrounded by police. Is she dead? I blurted out. The officer hesitated, then said, I'm sorry, yes. I stifled a sob. Was it quick? I asked him. Would she have been conscious when she hit the ground? I'm sorry, he said. I can't answer that. He waited for a moment, then asked gently, Can you tell me what happened? I swallowed hard and nodded. We went into the building together, but I lost her inside. She was depressed. I knew she wanted to jump. I tried to stop her the night before. I did stop her, and then she wanted to come back, and I should have known, but I didn't realise. I catch my breath. It's all my fault, I said, for letting her into the building. We used my pass. She didn't have one. She doesn't work there anymore, and I shouldn't have let her in. He wrote this down. So what's her name? He said. Helen Jones. What's her relationship with you? I don't know her. Not really. I met her for the first time last night. There was a Christmas party. She was up on the roof terrace. She was obviously suicidal. She said her life was fucked up. I fucked up everything. That's what she said. She'd lost her job at Cohen Macaulay there on the 10th floor, and I don't know what else. I just got talking to her and I stopped her from jumping, and we got in a cab home. I gave her my number because I felt sorry for her. I wanted to make sure she was okay. And then she called me earlier this evening. She said she lost an earring, a valuable earring, a diamond. she said, and she wanted to go back and look for it. But she couldn't get back into the building because she didn't have a pass, so she asked me to come with her and swipe it for her. But I lost her inside the building, and then by the time I realised why she really wanted me to go in, what she was really there for, it was too late. I ran up onto the roof terrace to try and stop her, but I sobbed. She already jumped. I was too late. Do you have an address for her? She lived in Kendrick Place, Baker Street. That's what she told me. We stopped there in a cab. It was just a building, just a corner of. I cast my mind back. I don't know the number, but I think I could show you the building on a map. Did she live with anyone else? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't think so. He asked, do you have any contact details for her next in kin? I shook my head again. No. Like I said, I barely knew her. I think she lived on her own, but I don't know any more than that. And can you describe to me in a bit of detail what happened this evening? I told him from the start, from the phone call about the earring to the cab journey to swiping Helen into the building and then leaving her at the foot of the stairs. Then not being able to find her, the whole thing must have been a ruse, I said. The lost earring, her fear of lifts, but I believed her. Because she said she was okay. She said she was feeling okay now, and I believed her because I thought, after all, if she had really wanted to jump, she could have just done it last night, couldn't she? My voice rose, forming a question, seeking reassurance, but the officer didn't answer. He wrote down what I was saying and then began to read a book. His radio crackled again, and a voice said something in the police jargon that I didn't understand. The officer folded up his notebook and tucked it back into his pocket. Can I ask you to wait here for a moment, please? He said. Yeah, of course. He got out of the car and walked over to the traffic, got over to talk to another officer. More police appeared, and my officer put his hands on his hip and scratched his head, then turned to look through the windscreen at me. The other officers all followed his gaze. They talked some more, and then finally my officer walked back towards the car. What's going on? I asked as he slid into the next seat to me. We're still trying to establish the victim's identity, he said. My heart thumped. You're saying you don't want me to identify it, do you? I'm not sure if I... No, he said quickly. It would need to be her next in kin. I turned to face him. But it's her, Helen, right? I mean, she had a phone in her handbag, and we have her handbag, he said. We're just looking into that. But there are some identity documents in her possession which suggest that she's what? I frowned confused. There seems to be an anomaly here. What kind of anomaly? Who else did you see in this building in the building this evening? No one. The building was empty. The officer licked his lips. I'd like you to come down to the station with me, if that's all right with you. We've still got some inquiries to make, but I'd like to take it to a further statement. Am I under arrest? I asked, my heart beating fast again. No, you're not under arrest, but you're a key witness, and you've been very helpful. If it's all right with you, I'd like to take you to the station now. I sighed. Whatever I can do to help, I will. Of course I will. Thank you. He started the engine and reversed back into the road. When we got to the police station, he parked at the front and we walked through the main entrance into the foyer. I was taken into a small room and offered a cup of tea. The officer disappeared and a friendly middle-aged woman in plain clothes came in and sat with me. She introduced herself as a victim support officer and told me that she was here to help me at this difficult time. She asked me about my friend, and she could get support for me if I needed it. I was informed that my officer had gone to talk to his superior. After a bit, she went away to check what was happening, leaving me with a leaflet to read. When she returned, she said that the case had been passed on to CRD. We were just waiting on the change of shift, she said, for someone to be assigned to this case. Several hours passed. I drank more tea and was given repeat reassurance that it wouldn't be much longer. Eventually, the door opened and a female detective entered. She took a seat opposite me. and placed a notebook on the table in front of her. "Hello, Tate," she said. "I'm DC Gallagher. Can I call you Tate?" "Yes," I agreed. She hesitated, and then placed a pen on top of the notebook. "Tate, we've been able to speak to the victim's husband." "She has a husband?" I asked in surprise. "Yes, and unfortunately, he's been able to come straight away." She paused and watched my face. "He's been able to identify the body." My heart beat faster. "And was it Helen?" She watched me warily. "No," she said firmly. "What?" I said, sitting forwards. "But it has to be. I mean, if it's not Helen, who is it?" "Her name is Madeleine Blakeley." I gazed at her. "Maddie? I understand you knew her." "Yes," I stuttered. "I mean, I didn't know her. I've met her a few times, that's all. She's been into the office. I work for her husband, Dan." I stopped. "It was Maddie who fell from the roof." She nodded. "But how?" I asked, bewildered. "And what was she doing there?" The detective continued to look at me, her expressions somber. "We were hoping you might be able to help us with that." It's the end of part 1. Part 2. Chapter 7. City of London Police. Pre-interview legal briefing. Officers' names: DC Karen Gallagher, DC Robin Heaton. Briefing location: Farringdon Police Station. Time 12:15 p.m. Date: Monday, the 19th of December, 2022. Legal representative details: Sarah Kellerman. Detained person details: Tate Elizabeth Ann Kinsella. Date of birth: 8th of the 6th, 84. Offence: murder, contrary to common law. The circumstances are: at 19:25 on Saturday the 10th of December, an ambulance was called to Eastcheap EC1 following reports that a woman had fallen from the roof of a communal office block. The woman was later identified as Madeleine Blakeley. On the first responder arrival, she was in cardiac arrest. Life was pronounced extinct at 19:48. It's believed that the deceased had gone to the building to meet a person known to her. She had in her possession her husband Daniel's employee security pass. Preliminary results of the post-mortem revealed the cause of death to be impact from the fall, which caused her heart failure. They also reveal that the deceased has been sustained a fresh injury to the left side of the cranium above the ear. The injury is believed to have been caused by a blow from a glass object, sustained prior to the fall from the rooftop. The weapon is believed to have been an empty wine bottle, fragments of which were found on the roof terrace and have been sent away for forensic analysis. There are no CCTV cameras on the roof terrace. Inquiries relating to CCTV from the entrance, lift and corridors are ongoing. No CCTV footage will be shown in the interview. At the time of the incident, your client worked in and had access to 225 Eastcheap. She told witnesses at the scene that she was with the victim before she fell. In the subsequent statements to police, she put herself on the roof terrace immediately after the victim had fallen. She later denied having been with the victim or having seen her at all that night. We believe that your client has an unquenchable romantic interest in the deceased husband, Daniel Blakeley, which has led to obsession. We have reason to believe that your client was the person that Madeleine Blakeley had gone to meet that night. We wish to question your client about her involvement in the death of Madeleine Blakeley. Your client has no criminal convictions. We are not prepared to disclose anything further at this time. Chapter 8. Monday, 19th of December. I stopped reading and looked up. Obsession? It wasn't a bloody obsession, and it wasn't inquited. We were in a relationship. We were. I put my head in my hands. We were together, for God's sake. Sarah pulls the laptop back round to face her. and waits in silence. I knew he'd do this, I whisper. Who? Dan. I met her gaze. I knew he'd deny a relationship if anyone confronted with it. He was worried about his daughter, Emily. He didn't want her to find out about us. Either way, this gives you a clear motive for murder, Sarah says, and they now have your phone. So what will they find? Nothing. She frowns. No calls, no messages, nothing at all. I deleted everything. Dan insisted. The phone experts can sometimes retrieve deleted messages, Sarah points out. They won't find anything. She raises an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? Dan's the head of information systems at the International Bank, I explained. He's an expert. He knows everything there is to know about tech security. And what about his wife? What do you mean? Will the police find messages between you and Maddie? I shake my head. No, of course not. Do you have her number stored in your contacts? Maddie's number? No, why would I? Why are you even asking me this? Because, Sarah explains patiently, the police are going to ask you about your contact with her the day she died. And because I need to know before we go into the interview room whether they might find anything to incriminate you. Well, they won't, because they're looking for the wrong person. They need to find Helen. Check her phone. Helen, Sarah repeats. Okay, let's talk about Helen. What happened to her that night? She asked. Where did she go? I don't know, I concede. I was with the police for the rest of that evening. I tried calling her the next morning. I went to Kendrick Place, to the building the cab stopped at, and asked around. No one knew her. I asked the police to find her. I gestured towards the door, but it doesn't look as though they even tried. They haven't even mentioned her. But she's involved in this. I just know she is. Sarah observes me silently. Maybe they're not interested in the truth. Maybe they're not interested because they have you at the crime scene, and because they have a motive for you, and they don't have a motive for anyone else. Okay, I took a deep breath. I know it sounds strange, but I think Helen may have done this for me. For you? You think Helen killed Maddie for you? I lean forward, because I helped her, to say thank you, in a rapt way, to integrate herself with me, somehow to be my friend, because she's crazy, I added quickly. I think she could have been unstable. I think Helen called Maddie, pretended to be me, and arranged to meet her at the office. I told her to come up to the roof terrace and then took her by surprise, assuming she hit her with the bottle she left there that night. But if Helen was helping you by killing Maddie, why would she then disappear and leave you in the frame? I don't know, I sighed. I haven't worked it all out yet. But what I am sure of is that I shouldn't have told Helen about me and Dan. She took me an unusual interest in my relationship with him, and she said some really weird things. Sarah frowns. What things? Okay, I tell her. I missed something out from the Friday night, the night of the party. After we left, we didn't go straight home. We went to a bar. We were driving through the West End, and Helen asked the cab to stop. We were somewhere in Soho. She didn't want to go home. She wanted to talk, she said. I can't remember where the bar was. We went down the steps into the cellar. I remember her ordering a bottle of wine and then putting her hand over her glass every time I tried to top her up. I must have drunk way more of it than she did. I barely remember getting home, but I do remember asking her what she had done that was so bad that she'd wanted to kill herself. She didn't say much, just something about a relationship that had gone wrong and how it was all her fault. But there was something really sinister about the way she mentioned this relationship, as if she'd done something really terrible and had nothing left to lose. That's how it seemed. And after that, she just kept diverting the conversation back to me and my relationship with Dan, asking me questions about him, about us. What questions? I can't remember exactly, but she seemed intrigued, almost excited by it. It was like I was talking her through the plot of a TV thriller rather than realizing what a mess I was in. But I talked about Dan because, well, because she was interested, and because I needed someone to talk to, and because she wasn't judging me like I knew my friends would. So I told her way more than I should have done. I paused, then sighed. I told her how amazing it was when I was with Dan, but how hard it was when he left me and went back home to his wife, to Maddie, and Helen kept saying things like, "But you said you deserve to be happy too, Tate. She's got everything. She's got a great big house and money and a daughter and a successful career with one of the biggest publishing houses of the country." I paused. "She's got everything, and you've got nothing." That's what she said. "She knew that about Maddie already?" Sarah asked me. "About her family and her home, where she worked?" I rubbed my forehead. I don't know if I told her or if she knew that already. But I remember the conversation getting really weird, and I remember that clearly. At one point, she leaned forward and said really softly, "You and Dad could be together, you know, if you wanted it badly enough." And then she just sat there, smiling at me. I watched Sarah for her reaction. Her brow furrowed. "Okay," she says after a moment. "And then what?" "That's all I've got," I admit. "Look, I know it's not much to go on." "No," she agrees. "But Helen's DNA will be on the wine bottle, as will yours," she points out. "But when they test it, they'll be able to identify her, right?" "They'll find a mixed profile," she says, "which may weaken the forensics evidence against you. But they won't test her for at random. They have to arrest her as a suspect and have a sample of her DNA to compare it with first." And at the moment, it doesn't seem as though they have any other evidence that would be given to the grounds to do that. If they did, they'd be pursuing her and not you. "But that's crazy," I cry out. "She shouldn't even have been in the building. She was trespassing. You let her in," she says. "So that's a moot point, actually. I didn't let her go up to the roof, though." "Can you be certain that she did?" She waits for me. "No," I concede finally. "So it's possible, isn't it, that the police are not going after Helen because the CCTV doesn't support what you told them? Because they have no proof that she was even there?" "But she was there, on the ground floor. That's where you left her, yes." "But you can't say for sure that she didn't just turn around and walk back out the building again." I exhale heavily. "Thing is, Tate," Sarah leans forward and speaks gently, You've put yourself on the roof at the relevant time. You gave the police an account that turned out not to be true, which caused them to think they were investigating a suicide when it was in fact a murder. The information you gave them would have affected how they dealt with the investigation in the crucial first few hours. In retrospect, it could well look as though you deliberately misdirected them, and then—" "I didn't do it. Someone else was with me, and they ran away before the police arrived." She winces. "It's a bit of a cliche, if I'm honest." I look back at her in horror. Are you saying that they think I made Helen up?" "It's possible," she replies hesitantly. "And you?" I demanded. "Do you think I'm lying?" Her eyes flicker to meet mine, and her face softens. "I wasn't there, Tate. I have no way of knowing for sure what happened that night, and I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to protect you." She leans forward again, but protecting you includes preventing you from putting forward an account which might not stand up to the scrutiny. It's better to make a comment until you know for sure that this is the defense you want to run. I think for a moment. "Someone put me in the frame," I say finally. "Someone told the police about me and Dan. And as far as I'm aware, the only person who knew about us was Helen. Dan wouldn't have mentioned me to the police unless they asked me about me outright. If they did, he'd have denied that anything had happened between us to protect Emily. But he would never have deliberately pointed the finger at me. Sarah looks doubtfully. He had to be pretty suspicious of you, though, didn't he? His wife is attacked and pushed from the building, and then you just happened to be there at the same time. No, I protest. No, he asked me, and I told him about Helen. And then he said he'd help me find her. He believed me, I add pointedly. I watched her face. Her expression is neutral, but I can tell what she was thinking. She thinks I'm deluded. Nonetheless, as I launch into my account of the telephone conversation I had with Dan, she calmly swipes the trackpad and begins to type. Chapter 9. It took him 3 days to call me, I say. I'd left messages, but he was grieving, obviously, and he had Emily to think of, and I didn't want to be needy. I tried my hardest not to bother him, but I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I felt so guilty. Guilty? Sarah eyes me cautiously. About us, about our affair. I thought that Maddie had found out about us, I explained. I thought it was our fault. You thought it was suicide? At that stage, yes. The police didn't tell me Maddie had been attacked. Dan and I met at work, and so I thought that she was maybe making some kind of statement to the two of us by killing herself at our workplace. I was thinking all sorts, to be honest, trying to get my head around it, but then Dan called me and told me that she'd been hit by a bottle, and they'd found a broken bottleneck on the roof, and that it had... I stop, take a deep breath, and squeeze my eyes shut for a moment. It had Maddie's blood on it, I said finally, my voice breaking up. He said that they thought she had been knocked to the ground and then pushed over the edge. Sarah takes this in. So what else did he say? He said he wanted to know what I was doing at the office that night. He was suspicious to begin with. Then I reminded him that he was supposed to come and see me that evening, that I was going to order a takeaway for us, and he was going to pick up a bottle of wine. We'd all had it planned. He didn't come because Maddie had to go out to meet someone. It was him who cancelled on me, not the other way round. I paused, then add, I don't want to tell the police any of this, though. There's no point. Dan would just deny it. And you have no evidence that he had arranged to come over to see you. I shake my head. Like I said, he insisted that I delete all of our messages, calls, everything. He told me how to prevent anyone from retrieving the messages by installing some software on my phone. He told me that it was over between us. He said that he had to think of Emily, and that he couldn't risk her finding out about us, that it would destroy her. I was devastated, but what could I do? So I agreed to delete everything, and then he said that I mustn't call him any more because he had a family liaison officer with him almost every hour of every day. So was that the end of the conversation? No. I begged him not to abandon me. I told him that I was really scared the police were going to arrest me for Maddie's murder. I told him about Helen, about how I'd met her mother, about the missing earring. I admitted that I'd swiped her into the building and lost her instead. And what did he say? He was upset with me, obviously, especially when I told him that I'd let on to Helen about us, about me, and him having an affair. But I was desperate, and in the end, I think he felt sorry for me. I asked him, I begged, to help me look for Helen, and he agreed. That's when he said he'd speak to Hayley and the HR department at Cohen McCauley to see if they had another phone number or an address for her. But Hayley didn't remember ever meeting Helen. No, and Cohen McCauley wouldn't give anything away. I've looked at social media, but Helen Jones, there are hundreds of them. Dan said that it probably wasn't even her real name. Sarah eyes me as she finishes typing. She had clearly been thinking the same. The thing is, Tate, she begins, pushing her laptop away from her and resting her hands on the tabletop. She hesitates, frowning, but I know what she was thinking. She's thinking that I can't prove any of this. I can't prove Helen exists. and I can't prove that my feeling for Dan were ever reciprocated. I can't even prove to her that Dan and I had this telephone conversation, not unless I know something about the police investigation that I couldn't otherwise know. Maddie's phone, I say quickly. He told me about Maddie's phone. It smashed when she fell from the priest, but the priest told him they'd recover the data. Sarah looked interested. And? What did they find? There were text messages and calls in her log. Messages between her and Dan. Messages he knew about, of course. What do you want to do about dinner? Won't be late. That kind of thing. Messages earlier that day to Kay, Emily's best mate's mum, to tell her that Emily had been grounded and that they had confiscated her phone. There was school stuff, emails to teachers, messages to friends, but there was nothing between Maddie and anyone that referred to a meeting at the office that night. Sarah sits back thinking about this. So, how do they know she was meeting anyone? Where did the police get that from? Dan's statement. It was what Maddie told him before she went out. I preempted her next question. He noticed that she was getting messages from someone before she left the house and replying to them. He said she seemed distracted, tense, wound up. When he asked her who she was talking to, she just said, "It's work stuff," and shut herself in the bathroom. But he said that when he thought about it, there was no sound on the phone she was using. She had it on silent, which wasn't normal for her. He could always hear when she got a message, usually. She had the same notification sound as him. So, in hindsight, he now thinks Maddie was using another phone. He said that Emily's phone was always on silent. She was always secretive about who she was talking to and when. So Dan thinks Maddie was using Emily's phone. I nod. And pretending to be Emily? That's what we're thinking, I agree. We don't know for sure, obviously, but Dan had confiscated Emily's phone for the previous evening and now it's missing. Dan and Emily searched the house for the next day. They searched high and low. They couldn't find it anywhere. Has Dan told the police this? Yes, of course. But the only phone recovered at the scene was Maddie's iPhone. Emily's was a Samsung Galaxy S10. The police searched the area for it, but no Samsung was found. Not on the roof, not on the ground, not anywhere. Sarah nods and types this up. I wait for her to finish. So presumably they tried tracking it. It's switched off. It's been switched off since that evening from round about the same time Maddie died. Sarah's eyes flicker up and meet mine. You know that for sure? I shrugged. That's what the police told Dan. So, she says slowly, either it ran out of charge at that point, which would have been a highly coincidental, or whoever killed Maddie took the phone from her and turned it off. But the police will know if it was in the building before it was turned off. They'll have been able to cell site it. They haven't told Dan about that, I say, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. Sarah types some more. Obviously they're going to say it was me, I tell her. That I took the phone and chucked it off the Thames or something. But you didn't. No, I said firmly, I didn't, because I wasn't the person who went to meet Maddie that night. Sarah thinks about this for a moment. So you think that Helen had somehow befriended Emily, which is how she had her phone number, and Maddie found out and went to meet her? Maybe, I say. That's where I'm lost. Dan too. We don't know what happened from there. But if the police could only find Helen, check her phone, I trail off. Even if she's deleted the messages, they can track where she was at that time Maddie fell, right? So long as she had her phone with her, and so long as if it was turned on, Sarah agrees. And if it wasn't? She shrugs. It can still provide a picture. If it's cell site somewhere, and is then turned off in a critical point. Good, I say, pleased. Sarah sits back. surveying the screen of her laptop for a moment. Okay, she says finally. I'll seek further disclosure regarding the phone work they've done, and I'll ask why they're refusing to show us the CCTV. They must have viewed it by now, so they're hiding something. I open my mouth to speak and shut it again. There's a knock at the door. We both look up. The door opens. It's DC Gallagher, the detective who spoke to me in the witness room on the evening Maddie died. How much longer do you need? Let me speak to my client, Sarah says. DC Gallagher shuts the door. Sarah turns back to face me. It might be good to find out a little bit more of what they've got before we go any further. I nod. This sounds good to me. They'll drip feed it, of course, Sarah continues. There'll be more than one interview. There could be several. But my advice to you hasn't changed. No comment, Tate. Let's put them to proof. She pauses. Which means that they have to prove you killed Maddie. You don't have to prove that you didn't. So let's see what their witnesses are saying, shall we? Chapter 10. Witness Statement. Criminal Procedure Rules. R. 16.2. Criminal Justice Act 1967 S9 Court Act 1980. Statement of Jeremy Allen Seeger. Age if under 18, 18 plus, brackets, if over 18, insert over 18, bracket. Occupation, CEO. This statement, consisting of 5 pages signed by me, is true to the best of my knowledge and belief, and I make it known that if it is tendered in evidence, I shall be liable to prosecution if I have willingly stated in it anything which I know to be false or do not believe to be true. Witness signature, J.A. Seeger. Date, the 12th of the 12th, 2022. I am the above named person. Most people know me as Jeremy. I am a Chief Executive Officer of the London branch in Le Crédit Français, a leading international bank known by an acronym CPF. Our London offices are situated on levels 12 to 19 of 225 Eastcheap EC1, which I shall refer to as 225. 225 is a high-rise commercial office block housing several different companies. The block is managed by Eastcheap Property Management (EPM), and they have contract with a security company called Sky Guardian Security (SGS). On Saturday, the 10th of December, at just after 11 p.m, I was at home watching TV with my wife Sharon. We were just about to get ready to go to bed when I received a phone call from Dan Blakely. Dan is an employee at CPF, and I also consider him to be a friend. He has been the head of information systems at the bank for the past 12 years and was recently promoted to the board of directors of operations. He is, in my opinion, excellent at his job. Dan apologised for calling me so late. He sounded very shaken and upset, and asked him if he was okay. He said that he wasn't okay, and he told me that his wife Maddie had just died. He said she had gone out earlier that evening to meet someone unknown to him. He had been called by the police to say that a woman had fallen to her death on the roof terrace of our workplace, and that they believe it to be Maddie. The police believed that Maddie had arranged to meet someone at 225 as she had Dan's security pass in her coat pocket and she had used that to gain access. He said that the police were treating her death as suspicious as she had been attacked before falling from the roof. The police therefore believed that she had been pushed. I was extremely shocked and upset at this news, as I had got to know Maddie over the years that Dan had worked at the bank, and Sharon and I were very fond of her and their daughter Emily. We had been invited to a dinner at their house numerous of times. Dan had told me that he had already been to the mortuary at Southwark St. Martin's Hospital and made a positive identification of Maddie's body. He had asked the senior investigation officer if the police had viewed the CCTV from 225 and if they had any leads, as it might have been on the roof terrace with Maddie's before she fell. The officer had told him that they didn't have any leads as yet, but that the security guard on duty had been instructed to preserve the CCTV footage and that they would send someone to view it in the morning. Dan expressed the concerns to me about this, as both Dan and I have had issues with the security company in the past and has raised these more than once with Jamie Hopkins, head of block management company EPM. During the week, there were unusually 2 doormen from SGS on duty, but at the weekend there is usually only 1. And Dan didn't think that the particular doorman on duty that night was sufficiently trained to be able to export the footage onto the removable storage device. Dan told me that he had therefore decided to go straight from the mortuary to 225 to check the footage had been properly preserved and to export it himself, if necessary, before any mistakes could be made. I am not particularly knowledgeable regarding video security systems, but Dan is experienced in this regard and has made me aware that mistakes can happen. For instance, the cameras have motion detection to save on storage space, so often switch on and switch off, and therefore didn't record everything, so it can be hard to find an event, with the results that it can be overlooked or overwritten. Also, the footage often records on the loop, and if the operative and inexperienced, they could accidentally reset it to start recording again, so that, again, it overwrites. On this occasion, Dan told me that his instincts had been correct, and that the security guard on duty, Kevin Prescott, was not sophistically trained to replay the recording, let alone proceed copies for the police. He also noted that the time of the system was inaccurate, and it was still set to BST rather than GMT, as it should have been. Dan told me that he acted swiftly to try to retrieve data, but that the relevant period had already been overwritten. He informed me that there was no coverage whatsoever of the inside of the building at the time Maddie died. Dan also discovered that the cameras in the stairwell and lower ground floor corridor was not functioning. They appeared to have been turned off, along with the camera that pointed at the exit to the car park at the rear. He was completely distraught about this and told me that he held SFG fully responsible. He asked me to take it up with Jamie Hopkins of EPM. I agreed that I would do so straight away. Dan Blakely is highly experienced, and I trust him fully in every respect and have complete faith in him professionally. If Dan was unable to recover the missing footage, then I'm confident that no one else will be able to do so. It is clearly lost, and if Dan holds SGS responsible for this area, I'll support him fully on this point. I also feel it is important to mention that the office Christmas party on Friday, the day before Maddie died, I mislaid my SGS security pass. The last time I used it was when I entered the building to go up to the bar for the party at around 7 p.m. When I looked for it in my coat pocket some time before I left the party at around midnight, it was gone. There was a lot of alcohol drunk that night, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that it must have fallen out my pocket. If it didn't turn up on Monday, the normal procedure would be report it lost and get a replacement. But after Dan phoned and told me about what had happened to Maddie, it occurred to me that it might have been stolen rather than lost. In hindsight, I remember something occurring when I was outside on the roof terrace in the smoking area on the evening of the party. It was not long after I'd had turned on the karaoke. I put my coat on and went outside for a cigarette. There was no one else out there except one of the agency staff. I didn't know her name at the time, and I asked her who she was. She told me that her name was Tate Kinsella. She made a point of talking to me and began flirting with me. She got up very close to me and tried to kiss me. I remember this because I rebuffed her and she wasn't very happy about it. It was after that that I discovered my SGS pass had gone. I fully support the police with their inquiries and am willing to attend court if necessary. Signed, J.A. Seeger, date 12th of the 12th, 2022.